tonight is the stuff that I like to study, and I think this is really interesting. But we're going to talk about supposed Bible contradictions. Y'all may remember that a week or two ago I gave you an example of one supposed contradiction that had to do with the resurrection of Jesus. You know, one account of the gospel says that Mary went to the tomb, but then another account says that two Marys went to the tomb, and so people say, well, that must be a contradiction. Well, it's not a contradiction, it's just simply the fact that one gospel has given you a bit of extra information that the other one didn't give you. Extra information does not mean it's a contradiction. But we're going to get into this a little bit more in depth, and I want to give y'all some more examples of this, because these are the kinds of things that people try to point to for reasons why they don't want to believe in the Bible, reasons why they say the Bible can't be trusted and it's just, flawed, it has so many contradictions, it doesn't make sense. So we're going to look at these allegations, we're going to look at these things that people try to bring up, and I'm going to show you that if you just look at it and just, use common sense, and if you're honest with it, you're going to see that the majority of this stuff is nothing. Okay, let's start by going to Matthew 5. Matthew 5. And I want somebody to read verse 16.
16.
Yeah.
Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven.
Okay. Simple verse. We've known it since we were kids. Jesus says, let your light shine before men. Okay, what is he saying here? Well, when he says let your light shine before men, he's not saying that you get a flashlight and run around and shine it up in people's faces. He's talking about, he's speaking in figurative language here. You're supposed to be doing something that other people can see. Shine as a light. Be an example to other people. What does it mean to let our light shine? What kind of an example are we setting? Look what it goes on to say. Let your light shine before men. How? What does that mean? He goes on to say that they may see your good works and glorify God. The example that we set, the way that we let our light shine, is by doing good works. And this passage makes it really easy for you to understand that we shouldn't be scared for people to see our good works. We shouldn't be, keeping these things secret. We shouldn't be worried about other people finding out about us doing these good things. Why? Because it says those good deeds could bring glory to God. So the point of this is, let other people see what you're doing. There's nothing wrong with letting other people see your good works. Okay? Pretty obvious. And as a matter of fact, if you go back up into verse 15, he says, neither do men light a lamp and put it under a bushel, but they put it on a lampstand or a candlestick, and it giveth light to all them that are in the house. If you light up a candle, you light up some kind of a light, you don't cover it up. This is something you want other people to see because it gives light to them, lets them know what they need to be doing. So again, doing good works, nothing wrong with letting people see that. Okay? Keep that in mind. That's obviously what Jesus is saying here in Matthew 5. But let's go to the very next chapter. Matthew chapter 6. Look in verse 1. We're going to the chapter right after this. Look what Jesus says here about doing good works. Okay? Somebody read Matthew 6:1 for us.
See ye that you do not do your charitable deeds before men, to be seen by them, otherwise you have no reward from your Father in heaven.
Now wait just a minute. Matthew 5:16, he says, let that light shine. Let other people see it. Don't put your light under a bushel. But here in Matthew 6, Jesus turns right around and says, now make sure you don't do your charitable deeds before men. Well, which is it, Jesus? What are we supposed to do? Now, if you look at this This is something that people point to a lot, and I've even, seen members of the church struggle with this, because some members of the church are thinking, well, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to keep everything that I do for God a secret and not let anybody ever find out about it at all? How do you harmonize these two passages? Now, before I just blurt out the answer, let me get a little bit of feedback from y'all, just to see what do y'all think about it. How do you think that these two verses would work together? Can they work together?
Isn't one of them your everyday life, and the other one is actually your charitable deeds that you do? I wouldn't do my charitable deeds, even though I live my life so people can see that I'm a Christian. I may not let them know that I've been charitable to certain people with certain things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do it just so they can see me do it.
Jesus is qualifying here, this verse 1, chapter 6, to be seen of men. That's
Right.
the difference right there. Showing your alms to.
Look down through there, verse 2, you see hypocrites.
Yeah.
How about this? The one that says, do good. So the other one pretty much says, don't brag about it just for men to be praised that you're doing good. Do it for God, not for men to be praised.
Exactly. Y'all are all hitting right on it there. That's exactly it. There's nothing wrong with doing good work and other people finding out about it. But if you do those good things specifically so that people can see you and you can get a big head and say, look what I did, showing off, bragging about it, yeah, that's what Jesus is talking about here. Nothing wrong with people seeing what you do, as long as you're doing it to bring glory to God. Now, if you're doing it to bring glory to you, that's what Jesus is talking about here in Matthew 6:1. No, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. So yeah, those are very good answers, y'all. That's exactly it. So, you just have to look at the verse here. Just pay attention to what Jesus says here. It's okay to do your good works and let people see it if you're doing those things to bring glory to God. But if you're going to be doing these things to show off for yourself, then don't be doing it. Don't be doing them for other people to see. So, it's really simple, and I don't see how anybody could look at this and just say, I think this is a contradiction. Just read it. It's really nothing. Well, this is a pretty simple one. It's pretty easy here. Let's step it up a notch here. Let's go to the Old Testament for just a second. Let's go to Numbers chapter 25. And we're going to look in verse number 9. Numbers chapter 25, we're going to be reading verse number 9.
And those that died in the plague were 24,000.
Okay, here in Numbers 24, the people of Israel, which were God's chosen people at this particular time in history, they had rebelled against God. They had become wicked. And so this plague came in and destroyed all those wicked people. And it tells you here that 24,000 people died in this plague. Now, that's a very clear-cut number that the Bible gives you. 24,000 people. Okay, there it is. How many people died? 24,000. Okay, let's keep that in mind. And I want you to hold your place here in Numbers 25. Let's go to the New Testament. Let me show you another verse. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. 1 Corinthians 10. And let's read verse 8. First Corinthians 10, I want somebody to read verse 8 for us.
Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed and fell in one day, 320,000.
Okay. How many people died in that plague according to this verse? Well, this verse says 23,000 people died.
Was that a plague?
It's the same.
Sexual immorality.
Well, it talks about people. I mean, that's what I'm saying. In Numbers 24, that's the disobedience that was going on there. Or Numbers 25, rather. That's...
Two different incidents that they're trying to tie together.
No, it's the same incident. Because if you read the whole thing in Numbers 25, it talks about their wickedness. But I mean, think about it here. He's talking about the plague that happened. And he says here, 1 Corinthians 10, 23,000 people died in it. Now, that's a pretty big difference because that's, a difference of 1,000. Numbers 25 says it was 24,000, but here in 1 Corinthians 10:8 it says it was 23,000. He's off apparently by 1,000, folks tell us. Paul got this wrong. Paul made a mistake. He's off by 1,000. And if you really even think about it, all it would really take to be off when it comes to numbers is if you're off even by one. He's off by 1,000, but if Paul had said, 23,999 people died, well, he's only off by one, but wrong is still wrong. So how do you harmonize this? I mean, this is 1,000 number difference between Numbers 25 and 1 Corinthians 10. Now, this is something that I really struggled with for a while because I thought that's pretty clear and numbers are pretty accurate. Numbers don't lie, and it's really hard to see how you could, harmonize these two. How could you possibly do it? Can you do it? Is it possible? Y'all are hitting right on. Y'all figured it out faster than I did. Y'all figured it out right here in class.
We're older if it was.
Okay. No comment. Y'all are right. That's all I'm going to say on that one. The way you answered is really simple. It's staring you right in the face. And when I figured this out, I could not believe I didn't even see this. What he's telling you here in 1 Corinthians 10, Paul is telling you how many of those people died in one day. Over there in Numbers 25, he's telling you how many people died in total over the whole scenario. So there's no contradiction there. 23,000 of that 24,000 died the first day. The other 1,000 died later on. There it is. It's just like this, just to give you an example. If I went on a fishing trip and I came back and you asked me, how was the trip? And I told you, oh man, the fishing was good. We caught 15 fish our first day out. He said, okay, that's great. Later on, you went and asked Heather, how'd that trip go? And she said, oh, it was wonderful. We caught 25 fish. You could sit there and think, well, hang on a minute. Wesley said 15, you're saying 25. Obviously a contradiction. It is not a contradiction. What did I say at the beginning? I said we caught 15 fish on our first day. Heather is telling you we caught 25 fish in all throughout the whole trip. So it's not a contradiction. You just have to pay attention to what's being said. And that's the same thing here in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. If you skip over what Paul says, 23,000 died in one day. You can't skip that. And sometimes I think that's what people do, and that's why people look at this and think this must be a mistake or must be some kind of a contradiction in the Bible. But you're going to see, I could stand up here all day long and show you a bunch of these, and you're going to see that that's what most of these boil down to being. I just don't see how people, even get off on this kind of stuff, but they do. Well, let me show you one a little bit more complicated than this. And this is one that I have, been asked about. I've seen people ask about this a lot. Let's go and look in John 1:18. John 1:18. We're going to ask the question, can God be seen? Is it true that God can or cannot be seen? What does the Bible say about that? Okay? John chapter 1. Let's read verse 18. Somebody.
No one has seen God in any time, the only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him.
Okay? This verse makes a very plain, a very clear, and a very obvious statement. No man, not even one, no man, has seen God at any time. There's been no point in time that any one human being has ever seen God. That's what the verse is telling you. Now, we could look at this verse and say, okay, nobody's ever seen God. But wait a minute. Aren't there places in the Old Testament that talk about people seeing God? Let me just give you the most obvious example that everybody usually thinks of. Let's hold our place in John 1, because we're going to end up coming back to this. But let's go to the book of Genesis for a moment. Genesis 32. And we're going to look in verse 30. Genesis 32. Somebody read verse 30.
And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved.
Now, let's think about this. John said nobody had ever seen God. But right here in Genesis 32:30, Jacob says, I have seen God and I have lived. I have seen God. But John said nobody's seen God. What is going on here? Now let me pick y'all's brains a little bit more here. What do y'all think about this? Do y'all have any thoughts on how you might answer this? Or if it could be answered?
An angel.
An angel? Okay.
Not the visible place, but
Okay. All right. I think you're getting on to something there. Here goes Miss Bond again. She's going to give the answer away. I may have to tell you just to keep it to yourself, because you seem to be answering all these things. That's pretty well it there. I think both of y'all are hitting on the same concept here. Let me go ahead and explain this to you first before I give you the answer. Let me give you a little bit of background to this, because I think it helps if we know what's happening here in Genesis 32. Y'all remember that Jacob had a brother. Does anybody know what Jacob's brother's name was? Esau. Okay. All right. Well, remember, Jacob and Esau, they were brothers. Jacob ended up getting Esau's birthright. And of course, the Bible makes it clear that Esau wasn't happy about that. So Jacob left. Him and Esau were separated. Hadn't seen each other for a long time. And Jacob is here catching wind that Esau's coming to see him. Well, Jacob's kind of scared, because he's thinking, Esau, last time I saw him, really wasn't happy with me about what I did about taking his birthright. So he may not be too friendly to me when he sees me. He might be mad, he might beat me up, or he might just kill me. So this is what Jacob does. Jacob sends his servants, all of his people, to go in front of him. And he even sends his wives to go out in front of him. He puts his own women out there. All this stuff in front of him. And basically, he uses them as a barrier to protect him from Esau. His thinking is, I'll put them out there first, And when Esau comes to see me, he'll have to go through them first to get to me. I'll see how he treats them. If he's sort of nice to them, then I guess that means he's going to be sort of nice to me. So really what Jacob was doing here was kind of being a coward, hiding behind everybody else to sort of preserve himself. Well, he sends all them on up ahead of him to meet Esau, and he's left there by himself. And as he's sitting there by himself, if you look in verse, I think 24, let me check. Yes, verse 24 says, "And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled with a man until the breaking of the day." Okay? Left all by himself, and here comes this man, and he wrestles with him. Okay, I want you to notice here that in verse 24, it identifies this thing he wrestled with as a man. Okay? But if you keep going on in verse 28, Jacob says that he wrestled with God. Verse 28. Now you might be scratching your head thinking, what is it? Who did he wrestle with? Did he wrestle with a man or did he wrestle with God? What's going on here? Well, let me throw a little bit more fuel on the fire here. If you can, I know you probably already got your place held in John 1, but if you can, hold your place here, and I want to give you another scripture to go along with this. Let's look in Hosea chapter 12. And let me see. I want to say it's in I was thinking it was verse 3, but that ain't it. Oh, verse 4, there it is. Okay, look at verse number 4, Hosea 12:4. Hosea 12:4, Hosea is talking about Jacob wrestling with this man. And here in Hosea 12 verse 4, what does this verse say that Jacob wrestled with? An angel. Okay? So the Bible's telling us that what Jacob wrestled with, it identifies it by three things. A man, God, and in this verse, an angel. Well, what on earth was it? Which one is it? Well, the answer is Jacob wrestled with an angel that was in the form of a man. That's why it's called a man, that's why it's called an angel. It was an angel in the form of a human being. Now you say, well, why was this angel called God? Well, the reason this angel is called God here is not because the angel is actually God himself, but this angel is being called God here because this angel represents God. All throughout the Old Testament, whenever an angel would come down from heaven and would speak on behalf of God, the Bible would refer to that angel as if it was God, because that angel is representing God. Like, for an example, you remember in Exodus chapter 3, the burning bush? The Bible says that that burning bush was actually an angel. And Moses was talking to that angel, and Moses referred to that angel as God. He said, why did he do that? Because that angel was speaking as God's mouthpiece. So you have an angel in the form of a man representing God. Okay? That's what Jacob saw here. Okay? Let's keep that in mind. Okay? Keep all this information in mind because it's going to help us to understand this. Okay? Let's go back to John 1. John 1, verse 18 again. Okay? In John 1:18, when John says that no man has seen God, this is what he means. What he means is nobody has seen God as he truly is up there in heaven. Nobody has seen, the Bible says, John 4:24, that God is a spirit. Nobody has actually seen God in His true spirit form dwelling up there in heaven. That's what he's saying here. What Jacob ended up seeing was not God in His true form up there in heaven. Jacob saw God in the sense that he saw an angel that represented God. Makes sense? He did see God, not in the literal sense that he actually looked up in heaven and saw the actual God in His spirit form up there in heaven, but he did see God in the sense that he saw this angel that was serving as God's representative. He saw God in a certain sense. That's the thing about it here. These two verses are talking about seeing God in two different senses. That's how you harmonize these verses. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, how do you know that John 1:18, John is talking about seeing God in His true spirit form? How do you know that? Where does that verse say that? Well, the reason we know that is because of the whole entire context of John 1 itself. I mean, if you would take a little bit of time and read John chapter 1, what this whole chapter is talking about is how before Jesus came to this earth, Jesus existed up there in heaven at God's right hand, basically. I mean, look here in John 1 verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word here is talking about Jesus. Not necessarily the Bible, but it's talking about Jesus. Before Jesus came to this earth, where was He? He was with God. Where's God? Heaven. So obviously here He's talking about the way that God is up there in heaven. Nobody has seen God as He exists up there in heaven. Make sense?
God's Spirit, isn't it?
John 4:24, yeah.
What about Genesis chapter 3 verse 8? And they heard, that's talking about Adam and Eve after they sinned of the fruit. They heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day.
Right. All I know to tell you there is God is a spirit, and the spirit don't have legs. So apparently what was going on there was another manifestation of God. Again, it wasn't God in His spirit form, but it was another, representation of God. So, and that's what I'm saying. There's plenty of other examples all throughout the Old Testament where the Bible talks about people seeing God. But whenever you look at these examples, it's always a representation of God. So it's always some kind of a vision or some kind of other physical manifestation that represents God.
Exodus 24 says Moses there and they down by you and the city of the elders of Israel saw God.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing you're talking about.
Right.
But over in 33, let's see, 33, chapter 33 of Exodus and verse, what was it?
20. Verse 20.
20. Yeah, and he said, thou canst not see my face, for there shall no man see me and live.
Right.
So,
Right. Well,
they don't contradict what you're saying.
Right. Well, you're going to see the same thing when, like the judges in the book of Judges, there's examples of some of the judges saying that they've seen God. Even in the New Testament, Acts chapter, I think it's 8. Don't quote me on that. No, it's either 7 or 8 when Stephen was stoned. I think it's chapter 7. The Bible says that Stephen saw God. He saw God and Jesus standing at God's right hand. But again, if you look at that, that was actually a vision. It wasn't him actually seeing God himself, but he saw a vision of that. So again, all these examples, whenever people saw God, it was always a vision or some other kind of representation or some kind of a manifestation. They still did not actually see God as he really is. Now, let me show you this verse. Let's look in 1 John 3, verse number 2. Because there is going to come a time, according to the Bible, when we are going to see God the way that he actually is. Let's look in 1 John chapter 3, verse number 2. Well, actually, let's just read verses 1 and 2. 1 John 3, verses 1 and 2.
Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew him not. Beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it cannot yet appear what we shall be, but we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is.
See, nobody has seen God as he really is. They've seen him in different senses, visions and manifestations, but seeing him as he actually really is, we're going to do it one day. We're going to see him the way he is one day, but it's going to be on Judgment Day. So, anyway, I could show y'all more of these, where people try to take two verses and make them go against each other. Let me give you one last thing here. This is going to be a little bit different. So far what I've shown you is, like I said, people try to take two verses and oppose them against each other. I'm going to do something a little bit different, because some people say that the Bible not only contradicts itself, but they say it just contradicts common sense. And let me just give you the most popular example that you hear a lot of people say. Think about Noah and the flood. Okay, we all know that story. God was going to send a worldwide flood to destroy all the wickedness that was on the earth. He told Noah to build this great big giant ship, put all these animals on it. People say, they think that just is a made-up fairy tale story if there ever was one. You honestly believe that there was a worldwide flood and some man built this big wooden boat, put all them animals on it, and they survived? You honestly believe that? And people say there is no way that all those animals could have fit in that little boat. There is just absolutely no way. Wouldn't have fit. Would not have fit. I'm going to challenge y'all to do some research on how big the ark actually was and how much stuff it could actually hold. I had no idea. If you just look in the book of Genesis 6, when it gives how big the ark was supposed to be, most of the time we just sort of skim through that. Oh, it's supposed to be such and such cubits wide and cubits high, and I don't even know what a cubit is. We just skim through it and we think, it's pretty big, but we just think, a decent sized boat. Okay, y'all may want to write this down. Here's how big the ark would be if we were to measure it in feet. The ark would be about 450 feet long. It would be about 75 feet wide, and then about 45 feet tall, roundabout. Now, those are based on a cubit being 18 inches. That's what those measurements are based upon. So 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, about 45 feet tall. Now remember, you also have to remember this, that boat was 3 levels, okay? 3 levels, and so that means, well, let me put it to you this way, 450 feet long would be about the length of a football field and a half. Times that by 3, because it's 3 levels. Now, people have done research into how much volume the ark could actually hold. It has been estimated that the ark could hold, get this, could hold about 420 railroad boxcar full of stuff. It would take 420 railroad boxcars to fill in the space that the ark would take up. That is huge. Those boxcars are big. And then some people will sit there and say, well, you know, okay, that may be a lot of space, that may be a lot of room, but just look at how many animals there are. You can't fit 2 or 7 of every different kind of animal. You can't do that. First of all, the only animals that were supposed to be on the ark were land animals. All them sea creatures, which the majority of our animals are probably sea creatures anyway, didn't have to even worry about all that stuff, just the land animals. And you also have to think about this. A lot of the animals that we have today, they didn't even have back then. Like today, we got 50 species of cows, about 100 species of dogs, 1,000 species of cats. They didn't have all them different species back then. They didn't have no Rottweilers, Chihuahuas, German Shepherd. They didn't have none of that back then. What they had when it came to dogs was just, basic stuff like wolves, coyotes, stuff like that. So that cuts down a lot of stuff. And you say, well, what about them dinosaurs? Dinosaurs couldn't fit on no ark. 1 or 2 dinosaurs would have taken up all that space. Yeah, that's probably true. If you bring a full-size dinosaur on the boat, it's probably going to tear that boat all to pieces. But y'all, dinosaurs start out as what? Eggs. That takes up about that much space. And you don't have to feed it. You don't have to clean up after it. Just put it in a pile of hay, keep it warm, and you're good to go. So that saves you a lot of space, a lot of time, and a lot of work. Y'all, Noah had common sense. The same thing that we did. I got enough common sense to realize I'm going to put something on a boat. I ain't going to put no big giant animal on the boat. I'm going to get it while it's an egg. So just use common sense and you can see that it makes perfect sense and that the ark actually would have worked. So anyway, appreciate you being here, and we'll continue this hopefully next week.